Once fertilization occurs, the prenatal stage of development commences. Even though the foundations of social, emotional, and intellectual development start at this stage, the physical aspect of this development is most noticeable. Development during this stage is the most rapid of all life stages. The prenatal stage is generally divided into 3 stages: germinal, embryonic, and fetal. The germinal stage starts at fertilization and ends with implantation. Implantation begins around day 5 and ends around day 10 to 12. When fertilized, the newly formed cell, the zygote, travels down one of the fallopian tubes while constantly dividing. Around 3 to 4 days after fertilization, when there are about 16 cells, the zygote takes on a spherical shape and is now known as the morula. At around 5 days after fertilization, when it is made up of around 64 cells, the morula transforms to include an outer cell mass, an inner cell mass, and a hollow, fluid-filled center called the blastocyst cavity. At this stage, the morula is now known as the blastocyst. The inner cell mass of the blastocyst will become the embryo, and the outer cell mass will eventually become the placenta. When it reaches the uterus, the blastocyst implants itself in the endometrium. At this point, it becomes known as the embryo. The embryonic stage starts at implantation and ends at the 8th week. This stage is characterized by cell differentiation. This is when the cell starts taking on specialized roles such as the heart cells, skin cells, and bone cells. This stage is perhaps the most critical for human development. Most internal and external organs and systems are formed during this stage, and the brain and spinal cord are almost complete by the end of it, although they will grow in size and increase in complexity for years to come. Some of the internal organs which have begun to form include the circulatory system, the stomach and kidneys, lungs, the nervous system, and the digestive system. Although sex is determined at conception, the internal sex organs begin to form during the embryonic stage but will not be complete for another 8 weeks. The limbs start out as buds emerging from the torso and continue to grow and develop during this stage. Fingers and toes also begin to form by the end of the embryonic stage. By the 8th week, the embryo becomes distinctly human-looking, although the head and neck still account for around half the embryo's total length, and the brain makes up almost half of its own body weight. Because major organs and systems are formed during this time, the embryo is very sensitive to environmental influences. Teratogens such as tobacco, alcohol, and medication are particularly influential during this stage of development. At the 8th week, the embryo has begun to form every major organ and system, and many are close to completion. In fact, 90% of the structures found in an adult human can be found in an 8-week-old embryo. The remainder of the prenatal stage is characterized by rapid growth and the maturing of these organs. The fetal stage starts at the 9th week of pregnancy and continues until birth at around 40 weeks. During this stage, the unborn baby is referred to as a fetus. The fetus measures only a few centimeters in length at the beginning of this stage and about 50 centimeters by the end. Although this stage is characterized by rapid growth, many other development milestones occur as well. All organs and systems formed in the embryonic stage, including the lungs, digestive system, liver, and kidneys, mature and are functioning in the early stages of the fetal development. The placenta is fully developed and functioning at about 14 weeks. It is a disc-shaped temporary organ largely made up of blood vessels that facilitate the exchange of substances between the mother and the fetus. The placenta acts like a kidney, lung, and digestive system for the fetus by supplying the fetus with oxygen, nutrients, and immune support, and removing wastes such as urine and carbon dioxide. It is connected to the fetus by the umbilical cord, which is made up of 2 arteries and 1 vein. The umbilical vein supplies the fetus with nutrient-rich oxygenated blood from the placenta, and the umbilical arteries return deoxygenated and nutrient-depleted blood to the placenta. The placenta is also connected to the uterus of the mother, and her blood forms pools in the placenta. The blood vessels of the umbilical cord complete a U-turn while passing through pools of the mother's blood in the placenta. This allows the exchange of nutrients, oxygen, and waste through the thin walls of the placenta without the fetal blood coming into direct contact with the blood of the mother. The placenta also produces hormones such as progesterone that assist in maintaining pregnancy. Sex organs start taking shape, and by around the 15th week, the sex of the fetus may be identifiable by an ultrasound. A female fetus will have produced millions of eggs, but this number will be reduced by the time she is born. The testes of the male fetus will be producing testosterone. Movement occurs in almost all parts of the fetal body and becomes more noticeable as the fetus grows. Reflexes such as sucking and grasping are highly responsive and will continue to develop throughout this stage. The fetus displays a breathing movement, but its lungs are filled with amniotic fluid, not air. Tooth buds form in the gums in the second half of the fetal stage. The bones, which mainly consist of cartilage, also start to harden or ossify around this time. This is a process that will continue until the end of puberty. The senses begin to function around 25 weeks after fertilization, and the fetus may respond to light, sound, and touch. These senses become more sensitive throughout the remainder of the fetal stage. Fat is deposited under the skin during the later weeks of the fetal stage. This assists with temperature regulation after birth.